Hello and welcome to Rare Cuts Media Society, the podcast that looks at hidden media gems and will never tell you to shut your hole. As always, your hosts, I'm Andrew Jagoda, and with me we've got Eric Hathorn. How are you today, Eric?
Pretty good. I'm just glad I'm not in Frogtown.
Me too. And Mike Ross, how are you doing?
What in the Sam hell are you talking about over there? Everyone wants to go to Frogtown.
No.
and Rob Lachek. How are you today, Rob?
Doing quite well. I am ready to talk about one of the greatest heels from the WWF 80s and 90s era. So I'm looking forward to this.
Or WWE, as many younger people would know it today.
Yes, it's true. Yeah. My apologies.
He's not from the World Wildlife Federation. He's not a panda bear.
Well, he could be. It could be about frogs, right? I mean, it's possible.
With acting talent like that, who knows? Maybe he is a panda.
Oh.
Well, as Rob said, we're starting a new arc, so I will hand it over to him.
All right. So since I won the first pick competition from many moons ago, our Kansas City trip, I have the honor of picking the theme for this next set of picks. I could have picked a famous writer for all of us to read one of her classics, or an accomplished composer to examine a handful of his classical arrangements. But no, I have decided to raise the bar and turn the spotlight on one of the most beloved or despised faces to grace TV screens in the 80s and 90s. Roderick George Toombs, better known as the WWF or WWE, as Mike corrected me, superstar, Rowdy Roddy Piper. The theme for this next set of picks is going to be films, TV, or other media that include the one and only Rowdy Roddy Piper. So, before we get into my pick, let's talk about the man. Let's talk a little bit about like professional wrestling. I know most of us, if not all of us, enjoyed wrestling at some point in our lives, childhood, adulthood, maybe both. What are your memories of the one great Rowdy Roddy Piper? Eric, I know you are a big wrestling fan. I'm going to you first.
Yeah, so I'm a big wrestling fan from like the 80s. And then, well, like late, I mean, I wasn't around for the whole 80s, but like late 80s, early 90s.
And then not baby watching.
Right. Exactly. But no, for like a while, I wasn't into wrestling in like the early mid 90s. We'll call it like the mid 90s. But I think people dropped off then because it was before like the whole like when the logo changed, when the WWF logo changed, and then it got to be like that Attitude Era stuff. And I like the Attitude Era stuff too. So I have like that first thing in like the late 80s where I had my Ultimate Warrior wrestling buddy, like stuffed plush dude that you could wrestle. And then I had like a bunch of wrestling cards and action figures from back in the day. Then Ultimate Warrior was my favorite though back then. That's like the Roddy Piper era. But I was all about the Ultimate Warrior. And then of course I got into it again in the late 90s, early 2000s, mostly early 2000s with like Stone Cold and The Rock and D-Generation X and all that kind of stuff. And now I couldn't tell you a single person on the wrestling. Like right now, I mean, I know John Cena has something to do with it, but I don't think he's on it that much anymore. And so I'm like out of touch with it now. But like those two eras, that like early 90s, late 80s, and then the really whenever a decade changed back then, that's when I'd be into it. No.
Fair enough. Sir Jagoda, what's your background enjoyment in wrestling, maybe with a focus on Rowdy Roddy Piper, if possible, if he was one of your favorites?
So I did like Rowdy Roddy Piper. From wrestling standpoint, it was mostly the whole, he'd come out with bagpipe players wearing a kilt, and I thought that was always fun. But the thing is that most of my memories are actually from my pick for next month. So I can't really go too far into my memories on Rowdy Roddy Piper, but there will definitely be more from me on that next month. So I'm going to save some of my answer for that.
Nice. I saved you for last on purpose, Mike. There's gotta be some special love for one Rowdy Roddy Piper, be your lineage back to the motherland, if you will.
I'm going to be disappointing.
I'm disappointed too. Come on.
Well, see, what we haven't really mentioned was that there was kind of the split, right? I mean, in the mid to late 90s, you were either into WWF, WWE, or WCW. And there was a brief, I was really into WCW. Like, I thought Goldberg was super cool in like 7th grade. And there was a short stint that Rowdy Roddy Piper came and was in WCW for a brief minute. And I thought he looked cool. I knew that he was someone that had been around, but I had never actually seen him wrestle much. I thought wearing a kilt was cool. I got a kilt someday, and then I made the three of you wear kilts. So
True story.
But ultimately, I ended up being drawn into WWE, and my fan favorites ended up being the wrestlers that typically wore masks. Specifically, I love Mick Foley and all the different personas he would showcase. And I do know just a little bit about what's happening currently. Kind of like the top people are like Cody Rhodes, Dusty Rhodes' son.
Mm-hmm.
So, but Vince McMahon is kind of a dirtbag. So,
Special shout out to Macho Man Randy Savage.
Oh,
that was my guy.
That was my favorite from like the 80s. Like, yeah, like he was super cool, like really in your face.
Let's be real. It was all about the Slim Jims. That's all it was about.
No.
And the quotes the quotes from Spider-Man.
Bonesaw is ready.
You're going nowhere.
I got you for 3 minutes.
Oh God!
So my background with one Rowdy Roddy Piper was kind of similar to yours, Eric. Like to that point, we were a little too young to probably appreciate Rowdy Roddy Piper in his prime, those late '80s years. But like when I was a kid, I liked watching like the old, and it was on like VHS tapes because this is like late '90s, like the old wrestling like kind of stuff. So I remember watching it, and always like Rowdy Roddy Piper would always be like the Hulk Hogan heel. I think there was the one at one WrestleMania, it was Hulk Hogan and Mr. T against Rowdy Roddy Piper, and I can't even remember who the other one, but like he always was like popping up. And then later, much later than that, when YouTube, which obviously now who doesn't watch YouTube, but like watching like the Piper's Pit episodes like in full on YouTube, hilarious, great. I mean, in truth, it showed he kind of like he could have had his own talk show. In truth, like I mean, he did in Piper's Pit, but like in reality, you could see him kind of being crazy and having some sort of like talk show. But yeah, like my experience was not like Rowdy Roddy Piper when he was wrestling. It was kind of more so like retroactively appreciating him as a heel in the wrestling world. But with all that said, undeniably, I mean, if someone talks about 80s wrestling, he will come up. He's kind of an icon of those late 80s, that era. But we don't need to go any more into his wrestling career. Now we're talking about the important stuff. the really important stuff, his acting career. So let's move on to my pick for the first pick of this theme, Rowdy Roddy Piper. The film from 1988, Hell Comes to Frogtown. It stars one, Rowdy Roddy Piper, Sandal Bergman, and Cease Verrill. Now, it's a B movie. It's an action movie. But notably, Randall Frakes, who is one of the writers, is a longtime friend and collaborator with James Cameron. He actually wrote the novelizations for Terminator and Terminator 2, among many other works, but kind of like gives a little bit of credence to the film. A little bit. It's like, okay, there's maybe somebody there who like knows what they're doing. Maybe I don't know if it panned out in the end with the actual film, but we'll get into that. So the film is set in a post-apocalyptic world where it is now inhabited by a population of human-sized frog creatures. Now, not totally certain if they were humans turned mutant frog or frogs turned mutant human. We don't need to ask those questions. We don't need the answers. We just accept they are frogs the size of humans.
I was asking questions.
We can ask those questions in a moment, though. We can. But what brings our star into the fold, the world has a massive, outside of the nuclear holocaust, essentially, from all of the dropped bombs, the world also has a massive infertility problem. And Sam Hell, played by one Roddy Piper, is apparently a very potent male. He is not sterile like much of the rest of the population. So our story begins with Piper being captured by the provisional government and commandeering his genitalia, if you will, for procreation purposes. So we'll get more into the film, but let's just kind of talk about Roddy Piper, his performance in the film. How did you think? How did Roddy Piper come off as an actor? Was it better or worse than you expected? Did anything like that really shined from his performance? We're going to go backwards. Micah, what did you think?
He had moments. Where it was like, oh, he's acting. But then the rest of it was more like a kid who's just kind of like going through the motions, reading the script and saying the lines. But specifically, the scene where his genitalia is being shocked is very convincing. And the reaction that he had to, the chainsaw coming at him to cut off the ECR unit on his ding dong, very convincing.
What other euphemisms can we use in this podcast today? We don't even have to get a count there. Get like a little counter in the corner.
His piper. Say his piper.
Round of three.
Don't get so rowdy. Gee.
But ultimately, I mean, the acting was pretty bad. But what I have to bring up, I don't think it's anywhere else in the notes, and I don't know a better time to bring this up, but the end fight scene takes place at the same location as another famous over actor. One William Shatner, when he's fighting one of the Gorns in an old Star Trek, the original series episode. That's really famous. And I recognized it, and it's like, it's the same movie, same thing. He's fighting like a reptilian amphibian creature in a desert wasteland. And the acting is about the same.
And much like William Shatner, he's constantly trying to get women.
Yes.
This is true.
Yes.
Now, Jagoda, now that you jumped in, thoughts? One Mr. Piper's acting chops. What do you think?
So what I took from his acting, and this honestly, it comes a lot from my pick for next month, because it's the same thing in there, is you can really see how he went from being the heel in wrestling to basically playing characters where he puts people off a lot, but he does show a little bit of redeeming quality enough that you don't just end up hating his character throughout the movie. You still side with him, which, while it's not great acting, that's a sign of good acting, because he's putting you off, but at the same time you're like, well, I still root for him, which is kind of what we were saying about wrestling. He was that heel, but we still think of him as a great wrestler character. We don't just throw him aside and say, well, he was a piece of garbage. We still think back and go, oh yeah, Roddy Piper, what a star. So to me, I mean, it's not great acting, but there's that niche that he's actually doing really well. I would also like to mention, you didn't mention one person that's in the movie, and I have to throw this in because Mike's here. Rory Calhoun plays Looney Tunes, and he was in Night of the Lepus, which I know Mike likes.
Night of the Lepus is something you should all watch for your Easter holiday or May Day celebration.
I'll pass. But I'll take on this question. That's for sure. So yes. I'm going to say, I thought, like, it kind of goes to, like, I checked my expectations of what I was getting into. It's a B movie. It's got a ridiculous, like, concept and everything like that. So I was just, like, along for the ride. And I thought in that scenario, what I was going for, what I was expecting, he was right on the money. He was like, I was convinced by his acting. And when you guys were kind of talking about it, and like I kind of feel like his wrestling, like it's a case of being typecast. Like his heel thing gets him roles like this that he could handle. But then also his reaction, like the two things you described, Mike, his reaction to like the chainsaw and the getting shocked thing is like at least 50% of the acting in wrestling. When you're getting hit by someone with fake punches, you have to act like they're landing and that they hurt, even though they're not really hurting you as much as they seem to be. When you're dazed because you've gotten hit in the head with a foreign object, you have to sell it. And so he was really great at selling that kind of physical discomfort, we'll say, like whenever he would get hit. I would have liked to see more physicality from him. Like, let's lean into the typecasting. And there were fight scenes, sure, but like we could have had more grappling. We could have had more of that throughout the whole movie. Because that's where I think he, like you did say, he kind of shined in those moments. And I think he's one of those people where, like, if you're gonna have someone lean it, like get typecast, like lean into it for him. Like, don't try to not be this. Lean into that full on 100%, because I think it could have been, he could have went further into that wrestlingness, but I thoroughly enjoyed his performance. But I think it's because I mean, I checked my expectations.
I'm gonna just add one thing. So I did try to watch another like 80s B film, and it was, I've never seen it before. I'm sure some of you have, but The Toxic Avenger. They make Roddy Piper look like a genius actor. So I will say that.
That's true.
That movie definitely came up in my mind, and I'll probably talk about it later too.
So I Mike, you brought it up first, and I think the key I think between you and Eric, there are two things that I wanted to touch on. So I agree with your sentiment exactly, Mike, that his reactions to so many things were like spot on. They were great, but it goes back to what Eric said. He'd been doing that for years as a wrestler. Right. I mean, he was selling everything for years in front of audiences of 20, 30,000 people, if not more. So that it was totally in his wheelhouse, but there were definitely pieces of his acting, maybe in a little bit of the quiet moments, weren't quite as good. But I think the thing that helped him in some of like the comedic bits, I think, were definitely good one-liners, little zingers that he had throughout it. I mean, that probably helped him what helped him get that kind of at least on par was time like with doing Piper's Pit, right? Kind of acted on the fly. I mean, in truth, that's kind of like a wrestler's world, right? Acting on the fly. I mean, I know they have. Well, it's not. Is it choreographed, right? This sort of stuff's planned out, but stuff always goes sideways, right? So it's kind of like in their wheelhouse to act on the fly. But his timing, I thought, was something that I was very surprised. Like the comedic timing, which was really good. For, at least, who knows? Maybe there were numerous cuts, and they've finally got a good one. But the finished product, his comedic was pretty good.
Yeah. I'm going to say that the comedic timing is like wrestling in the sense that we see it with, the, what do they call it? The kayfabe or whatever they call it. Like it's not fake. It's
not fake,
kayfabe
but it's
or
not
whatever.
Real.
Yeah. It is a dance. It is choreographed. There's timing. There's there's beats of like, I hit this, I wait, I have to be here because he's going to jump off the turnbuckle. So I feel like comedy, dance, music, there's all that kind of timing stuff in it. And so like comedy is going to have that rhythm that he's going to be good at from wrestling. Like, I feel like it's related. And you get the wrestlers who can deliver like the insult like they're a stand-up comedian or at a roast because of that timing. So I'm going to say that's I think he had it on the first time. I'm not going to say he had to do a bunch of takes.
I wouldn't doubt you. I would love if there was like a deleted scene or like blooper reel for this. It'd be pretty entertaining, I think, for this film, especially with the costumes. I can see. Well, we'll get into that here shortly with so many of the actors, and I'm sure stuff fell off of like some of the frogs like costumes like during a scene. But anyway, so get deeper into the film. After one, Sam Hell is commandeered by the government so they can use him to essentially impregnate a bunch of ladies. Two of the female government officials. There's no laughing. This is a serious matter. This is post-apocalyptic world. We're trying to propagate the planet. So the two female government officials, who while he's captured, they take him on a mission to free a bunch of fertile ladies from Frogtown, where they've been captured and kidnapped or whatever the circumstances. But on top of going to rescue them, they want him to impregnate these ladies as well. So
to just interject one thing, I'm not sure on the pronunciation of the actress' name, but Aidy Bird, she's one of the like head nurses that's at the facility that comes in and does talking. She is the best actress in the whole film. That she was the one going along on the mission, because it would have been 100% more entertaining with like her sassy quips and stuff coming back at him.
That would have been great. It would have been a buddy film then. It wouldn't have been an action movie. It would have been a buddy film with Roddy Piper.
We're going,
It could be both action and buddy film.
I can just hear eyes on the road. So the film itself, it's a B movie, right? It's got car chases, it's got chainsaws to the crotch, it's got fight scenes, it's got all sorts of crazy stuff that you'd expect from a B-80s film, right? And stuff you don't expect. So speaking of that, what you didn't expect or what you did expect, what stood out to you? Well, I'll give some of my impressions. I think some of the things that stood out for me good, I actually did kind of find the costumes to be pretty decent for a B film. I don't know what their budget was. I guess we could probably look it up, but I'm sure it wasn't super crazy. But I thought a lot of the costumes, I mean, even some of the car chases were 80s good, if you will. So I was intrigued by that. Some of the plot wasn't great. But again, it's an 80s film. It's or an 80s B film, right? It's a B action film. I mean, Lord knows we've covered a few in Rare Cuts Media Society already, and it probably fits in the line of there. There were a lot of other production value things that I didn't really care for, but let's kind of throw it around the horn. Let's get the conversation going. Eric, what were some of the gleaming scenes from you, things you really took away from the film?
So overall, the first thing I have like two things that I would come to mind about this movie after I watched it while I was watching it. And the first one is that this movie has no business being as good as it is. And the other one is this movie is not that good. So those two things are happening together. And that's kind of how I felt about it the whole time. Like there were things about, like, I was like, this is really good for a B movie, but it's not a good, like, movie. I feel like it's at the top of B movies in its time. Like, if we go back to that Toxic Avenger, because the Toxic Avenger is like legendary in B movies. But it's like, it's pretty terrible. It feels like it was like very independently filmed. It's like the plot is kind of weird and disjointed at times. But because of like the imagery, and it's got that kind of like oozy goozy Toxic Avenger kind of thing. And it's, kind of like poking fun at like stuff, and it gets into like the sexual humor in the same way. But it's like, this is so much better than something like the Toxic Avenger as a movie. So like and I think one of the reasons why it runs under the radar is because it's not the like B movies. If they're really bad, they're funny because they're bad. But like, if they like, it accomplished the goal it set out, it made a solid B movie, and you could kind of enjoy it for that. So like I said, no business being as good as it was, because I expected it to be a lot worse, but at the same time, it's still a pretty bad movie. The frogs, this is my biggest like weird thing. The frogs don't all look alike. Like the Frogtown people, they don't all look alike. And I want to know more about like the frog. Like, I was getting vibes of like there's that movie Children of Men, where like it's kind of a fertility story, and I was also getting like District 9 vibes, where we have like the aliens and they're all in like a locked in, like, a little place contained, so like I was like, where did these frog people come from? Where, like, I kind of got into that. I would have loved to see more of Frogtown. Like, we had that like rundown warehouse looking thing, but like I want more Frogtown backstory. Like, I want more of like the world of Frogtown. I could have gone for more, because I did love the stuff that happened there, and I could go for more. I'm trying to think of some more little things.
You're not going to bring up the Dance of the Three Snakes?
Oh, I'll let someone else take on the Dance of the Three Snakes, because it seemed pretty legendary as they were talking it up, and then it was. But like, there's an example of like, that was totally ridiculous, but they knew it was.
They knew it was,
and it was supposed to be.
Yes.
Like, they weren't trying to make you like this whole, that was like it was like a gag. And I don't think they were thinking it would be the funniest gag, and like it was going to be like, we're going to win a Golden Globe for best comedy or musical. Like, they didn't think that, but they knew it was going to hit in a way that a B movie joke would hit. And it did.
Thank God they didn't show anything.
Right? God. Well, I mean, they kind of did, but it was under the loincloth or whatever.
This is true. Mike, it looks like you have some strong feelings here. Please.
Well, there was quite a bit of erection humor in the movie.
Well, true. I mean, considering the star of the film's goal is to impregnate ladies,
yeah.
kind of.
But even at the beginning, when like they have him hooked up and he's starting to understand what the ECR is, that's around his genitalia, and Spangles is down like hooking something up or doing a test or something, kneeling by him, and if you have your sound up, you can hear like a creaky noise, like he's getting a boner.
How loud did you have your sound turned up?
He was waiting for it.
And he's like looking at it, I was like, oh my god, this is so wrong and disturbing. And
So you're saying something was going to happen with that flap?
Was it?
yeah, it opens with just a
Was it the sound that you get when you take a? I can't even say it without laughing. Take a one of those spring door stoppers.
Oh,
no, it was more like a knock noise. It was like a, kind of.
yeah.
See, that's what I would imagine in those scenes, the Dance of the Three Snakes, if it on Svengoolie, because it was on Svengoolie, they would have had to do the spring on the door thing.
Yeah, and so then eventually you see Toady, who is obviously a toad because that's why he's named Toady, and he is having Spangles do this erotic dance in front of him, and then you start seeing motion under the cloth, and there's multiple ones, and it's just like, oh my god, what is this? This is terrible.
Three Snakes, that's what it is.
Grateful they did not follow through with showing anything. I was like, oh please, my god, don't. I don't want to know. But I would, same as you, I thought the costumes were actually pretty good. I mean, it wasn't animatronics like to that degree, really. It looked like more like puppetry, or whoever's acting inside, if they move their jaw, kind of like you see some of those like Jurassic Park masks at Target or whatever, and like you move your jaw and it affects the mask, and that's kind of what it was. So, because it's like frogs and toads don't make P and B sounds, and I'm starting to get again too deep into like what the movie is, because
the science of it.
You just gotta accept it. But I was impressed with the costumes. I thought those were well done, and like Eric was saying as well, there are B films that are just unwatchable. Just they're so poorly made and boring and uninteresting. I had no idea what was going to happen next with this film. It was so unexpected where it kept taking turns. So I'll give it that. And I will also say I watched it twice. So St. Elmo's Fire only got one watch.
Well, that was a B movie.
That was an A movie.
That's an A movie.
They made a lot of money.
I was going the other direction with the alphabet. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, no, it made a lot. I'm going to give my one St. Elmo's Fire objection, and I'm coming for you, Mike R, because y'all complained about how like creepy Emilio Estevez was, Kerbo. And he was, don't get me wrong, he was creepy, but Rowdy Roddy Piper's character was just as harassy.
Now I want to see the movie with Emilio Estevez instead.
He was right. He was just so. What? That's the question. Then was Emilio Estevez just more convincing as a creep?
He was,
and so his acting was better. Just putting it out there.
Yeah.
Hell comes to Georgetown.
Beautiful.
The crossover we didn't know we wanted.
So, Sergio Goda, thoughts? I don't think we've gotten to you thus far.
How long's it been? 15 minutes since we started this question. So I want to go back to what Eric was talking about. So I think that the reason this movie works so well and seems like it comes off better than it should is because kind of a rule of thumb with B movies, or why they're B movies, is that over the top characters in over the top situations with over the top reactions. And if you're missing one of those, it just doesn't flow, and that makes a lot of bad B movies. So, like, as an example, there's actually a movie from the 70s that I want to mention that's got a very similar plot to this called A Boy and His Dog. It's from 75, and it was starring Don Johnson from Miami Vice, all of that. But it was based on a novella by Harlan Ellison, who is basically the author version of Rowdy Roddy Piper as a complete heel. But the thing about that movie that it didn't get about B movies is that it took itself way too seriously, whereas, I mean, obviously this movie did not do that. So, like, we had frog people, whereas The Boy and His Dog just had, like, people with pale makeup on, which is actually kind of similar to if you went through the Planet of the Apes movies, where their mutants just basically had pale faces, which is also kind of funny because the opening of Hell Comes to Frogtown has a reference to Planet of the Apes when they showed the little Statue of Liberty thing amid the rubble, which I really appreciated. But anyway, so A Boy and His Dog, it took it, he's one of the only, like, fertile humans they want to repopulate, but everything was super serious, and he wasn't likable at all. So if you have an over the top situation, but your character isn't really over the top, he's just an ass, then you lose that fun. And then his reactions, it doesn't really matter because nobody wants the character to succeed like we do with Sam Hell. So, a little B movie analysis for you, if you will.
The one thing that I wanted to also touch on, and you brought it up, Jagoda, Eric, you brought it up, and Mike, I don't know if you had brought up any specific examples, but I'd like to almost like start a list because there's a lot of like weird plot similarities to like other films. Like, obviously, nobody who made Children of Men was like, I'm going to use Hell Comes to Frogtown as my model here. They weren't doing that. But, like, there were so many, like, weird, like, kind of connections, like, from other films. Like, the biggest one for me, which was, and I looked it up a little bit to kind of understand, like, the timing, was Fury Road, which, like, it's a Mad Max film. If you kind of think about it, it's very similar. It's post-apocalyptic. Furiosa is going to pick up some ladies to steal them from, like, I can't remember what the actor or the character was, but, like, to take them from that town and free them. It's kind of a similar type of concept here. So when I looked it up, the time that it took for Fury Road to be filmed and created was forever. So that let me try to find my notes here on that. Who wrote Fury? Who wrote the for Fury Road?
I got it right here.
George Miller.
Yes.
George Miller. I had it. George Miller actually wrote it in like 87. For like basically the plot and the screenplay for Fury Road. It just took forever for it to get made. Now, obviously, they didn't steal it from that, but it's just kind of funny and how similar, like the concept, the idea, like going to rescue ladies, unless that's just like a never-ending idea and that's going to happen forever. But I just kind of found it interesting of like how many other films, it's like little bits and pieces. I guess in a post-apocalyptic world, it's just thinking about impregnating women, or in other where there's sterile sort of world events that occur and people become sterile. I mean, just kind of interesting how like few things, many years separated. So it's like I could see little bits and pieces, not necessarily taken, but definite similarities. The one thing I kind of want to talk about too, and I think we talked about it, is it's definitely a B film. And I think, Eric, you said it best, was at least the start of the conversation. Then Andrew, you kind of really built on it well. It's a B film, but like you said, it's almost too good to be a B film. It's like, it's one of those where you need, if you wanted to like really be a great movie, it wasn't going to be the case with this film. Right. But if you wanted to be that like cheap, generic B film, it's like you almost did it too good. You needed to dumb it down.
If it was the B film, it wouldn't have Rowdy Roddy Piper in it. Because, you know, he was pretty popular at the period that this film was made. So he definitely was getting paid. So,
you know, if we really want to study the B movie aspects of it, we should probably study the sequels, because they didn't have Rowdy Roddy Piper.
I'm sure those ones don't have the magic of this one.
See, we can have a follow-up episode.
Yeah, the second one instead has Robert Zadar. Which, if you've ever seen him, he's got this massive jaw. And he was in Maniac Cop with Bruce Campbell. So there you go.
So maybe this is a follow-up episode. We watch the sequels to Hell Comes to Frogtown and then make another episode. No,
I'm going to bring up another movie that I guess it's not technical. This is the difference. So this one tried to be the best B movie it could be, and it succeeds, because it hits all the marks that Andrew laid out. But if we turn the sequels are lacking something, they don't have the magic of this. And if we go and turn to one of our past picks, that is like one of my favorite picks of ours of all time, is Mannequin. And Mannequin actually has a lot of the same, like, this is a B movie, but it was presented as an A movie, if we'll call it that for lack of a better term. So like it only had, it became like the cult status movie. Now maybe it got more like airtime on like WGN during rain delays and stuff like that, because it was still an A movie, big, you know, a bigger production company and stuff. But like it was hitting the bottom of the barrel of the big leagues, where this was like batting above the league it was in. Like it stayed in its lane and it hit the marks. Now the sequel to Mannequin, once again, terrible. It doesn't have the magic of the first movie, but like I would compare, like, you know what I mean? Like that, those kind of like where they were placed and what they do well, kind of show. Like if you tried to put Frogtown up in the big leagues, it would not succeed. But because it was at the top of its game here, it did.
I'm just going to do it. I'm going to read the quick plot of Hell Comes to Frogtown 2.
Oof.
In the sequel to Hell Comes to Frogtown, the mutant frog leader of Frogtown kidnaps a professor and forces him to make a serum that will turn everyone into frogs. They also kidnap some people to test the serum on, and courageous Sam Hell will have to save them.
No.
So maybe there's your answer, Mike. That maybe the frog people were a product of some sort of chemical like contamination. So maybe they were people.
Maybe.
I'll tell you what.
Is this a Jeff Goldblum fly thing?
I'll tell you why that doesn't work. I'll tell you exactly why that doesn't work. Like the plot's
only one reason.
Well, I just got one just from the description. So in the original Hell Comes to Frogtown, we've got Sam Hell going to Frogtown, and the reason he's going is rather stupid, because if you really think about it, if he really is like the only fertile man on Earth, wouldn't you keep him like locked up somewhere where he's not going to be hurt? But anyways, his purpose for the U.S. government, whatever the health, I can't remember the name of the department, but like his purpose is like the sexual, procreation thing, and that drives the whole plot. So like that's the reason why they're going to rescue these people. That's the reason why we get all the jokes that we get. The gags that we get are all related to that. When you have him go to just like stop people from being turned into frogs, but remember he has a special role in this post-apocalyptic world, but now this task has nothing to do with his procreation role, is gone. It's done. It doesn't have the same, like there's no connective tissue anymore.
And we can't ignore the fact he does rape a girl in this movie.
Which is another reason that I brought up a man or a boy and his dog.
And Kerbo does not. He just stalks her.
Redeeming qualities for Kerbo.
So Eric, I was gonna add on to your thought of like if they would have kept Sam Hell, because they should have kept him back, put him in like a protective building where he's like not going to be in harm's way. That would just be an X-rated film.
It's true.
That would not be an action film.
It would be a different kind of action film.
Yeah. That have lots of like saucy music playing, sensual sensual music going on.
Hell comes
dim
to
lighting.
Yes.
All right.
Man.
I think we have covered, unless there's any last big tidbits about Hell Comes to Frogtown.
Arabelle, the frog tip-off lady that's a dancer at the club, wants to procreate with Sam Hell. What are the results of that? I want to know. Did it happen? I'm
going to say a frog with hair.
We have a long cut, so
just a frog with hair.
Frog with hair.
I mean, see, that would be a better sequel. Is that it actually happened, and now there's the spawn of the two of them, and this child that doesn't fit in now hates his father and is seeking revenge on the deadbeat that left him.
So this is Sam Hell goes to suburbia and has a family. That's the name of that film.
It's called Suburban Commando.
Well, and that is actually a good segue to the last bit I want to touch on. Well done, Eric H. So Roddy Piper, a wrestler, right? When you talk about Roddy Piper, you don't think of actor, you think as a wrestler. But there have been a lot of wrestlers who've turned actors, right? I mean, you think of like old school Hulk Hogan, Suburban Commando, Jesse Ventura, he was in Predator, Andre the Giant was in Princess Bride. A lot of wrestlers became actors even briefly, but Roddy Piper did have a pretty extensive acting career. I want to say he was in at least a dozen or more films from the 80s and 90s. So a little different there. But then you look at newer school wrestlers like The Rock. I mean, he's been in tons of films, be it voiceovers and recently with Moana. But think of all the films he was in live action. John Cena being another one, Batista with all the Marvel films. So thinking of all those pro wrestlers, Roddy Piper, where does he fit? And maybe there's some other wrestlers you want to throw out there. Where does he fit on that scale? The good actor of the wrestlers, or is he at the bottom of the list, a bad actor of the wrestlers turned actors?
Better than Hulk Hogan.
Okay, well, let's maybe start this way. So, who do you all think of those, or even other ones? Who's been the best actor of all the wrestlers?
I'm gonna go ahead and say, because I'm pretty confident in this one day, future Disney legend Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. I think he's the best actor out of that list that you presented. I would put him in my top.
He's done the most. Yeah. He's done the most work He's been consistently successful. He has more range than most of the wrestlers.
I would not want to see Roddy Piper do a musical part and do the musical part in Moana. I don't think it would turn out well. But I think it's fair. The Rock, Dwayne The Rock Johnson, like you said, Eric, and I'll even say it, Disney legend, Dwayne The Rock Johnson.
One day he will
Definitely
be.
top of the heap. Speaking of that, who would be the bottom of the heap? And this is not a knock because they're pro wrestlers, right? The acting is not there. Who do you think would be at the bottom of the list of those we've mentioned?
So I go ahead.
I mean, there's a lot that we didn't mention. I mean, there's quite a few movies that, because wrestlers are actors and athletes, and they all have that desire to act. It's kind of like actors who dabble in music. They all really want to be musicians. And there's rock stars who really just want to be actors. Similar to that, we find just about any modern wrestler who has had any sort of semi-success has been in a movie at this point. And there's a lot of terrible movies that feature them. So like the actor who played Kane, he's in like a horror movie that went nowhere, but it's just because, oh, he's a big guy, let's throw him in here and make a bad movie. So I think that there's a lot of really bad wrestlers that try to make that leap.
All right, let's flip
wanna-
the conversation.
Well,
Okay,
I
go
want to
ahead.
jump on that for
Yeah.
a second, because I was when we were talking about like where people fall in like this good and bad, and I'm not saying that they're necessarily bad, but like the purpose, like that Mike brought up, is the big guy wrestler character. Like, I'm a big guy, like that's the whole thing, and that's why I'm in this movie. Both Andre the Giant and Dave Bautista are that. Like in Guardians, like Drax, he's the big guy. Like they needed a big guy to be him. And then like Andre the Giant in The Princess Bride, like they needed the big guy. So like they got those roles because they were the big guy. But they do it well. They both do it well in the roles that they were given, where some of those other guys don't do it so well. But like that's not leading man stuff. So like I you know what I mean? Like I would kind of put them at the bottom because they're just playing like the bit role that the script called for.
Good point.
Personally, that's what I was going to say about Andre the Giant. You know, God love him and everything, but he wasn't given any kind of real acting challenge. It was just, you're the heart, be lovable. And he did it well, but it wasn't really showing off a lot. I will say Dave Bautista, though, I mean, he has a lot of that, like you said, Eric, but as Drax, he did have a very good comedic timing. I mean, his delivery on everything. If you watch the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special, oh my God, hilarious. So I have to give him props for that, but I would still put Batista kind of down lower because I want to see if he can actually do leading man, and I don't know that he can.
I put him above Hulk Hogan still.
Oh yeah, definitely. We did Suburban Commando. That was, we saw what he could do.
Hulk Hogan, I'm gonna weasel it in one of these days, but Hulk Hogan is got this series, TV series, Thunder in Paradise. And in Thunder in Paradise, the whole series of Thunder in Paradise was filmed. Well, let's say 99% of it was filmed on Walt Disney World property. So like they'll like go somewhere in the Middle East and they'll just go to like the Morocco pavilion in Epcot and film the scene there, or they'll need like a body of water. So they're like, if you look in the background, you'll see the Grand Floridian over there. They'll show like exterior shots of like Disney buildings as like, this is the, the evil layer of the villain or whatever. But the whole thing's on Disney property. So we might have to watch more Hulk Hogan at some point.
Okay.
No, we're not doing that. All right. So let's the final topic for this. Roddy Piper. Do you think we can even just kind of throw it out? Is he at the high end? We know he's not the best, right? The Rock is definitely top of the heap, way above all the rest of them. But I don't think he's at the bottom. I think where is he? Is he kind of
Middle
on the upper
card.
half?
Middle
Yeah,
card.
Or is he in the bottom half, if you will?
I
would personally say, I'm sorry, go ahead, Jagoda.
I was going to say middle, but leaning toward the top, personally.
Eric H., looks like you're in agreement with that assessment.
Yeah, and so like my reasoning for like that middle is like I feel like let's bring him up with Hulk Hogan. Like Hulk Hogan had more like marketable star power for some reason, because let's not forget he was in whichever Rocky he was in. Wasn't he was in which one?
Rocky 3.
There you go. So like he was the guy of wrestling. He was like the face of wrestling back in the day. So they would always put him in the high profile stuff. So he wasn't good, but like Roddy Piper never got the chance to try something like A-lister. He probably would have done a better job than Hulk Hogan, but because he didn't have the name recognition, it wouldn't have gone so far. So I feel like he kept himself in the middle, at least with this one. Like if this is indicative of his work, like he kept himself in the middle of the pack. Like he by not trying to go from, like, he was like, this is my bread and butter. This is what I can do. I can do it well. These B movies are a thing that my fans still like to watch. It's like in the Venn diagram of like wrestling fans probably like this kind of movie too. I'm going to do this and I'm going to be really good at this, but that's like being like, I'm going to play minor league baseball and I'm going to be great at minor league baseball, but I never want to go to the MLB. I just want to stay in my minor league team and hit home runs off minor league pitchers.
Yeah. Yeah. He had his niche of, like we were saying, hated, but not to the point that you don't care. He had that niche. He was good at it. Good for him, but didn't take that leap up.
Mike R., where do you stand on one Rowdy Roddy Piper?
No, I think he's a solid middle card wrestling actor, to be specific.
Yeah.
As a normal actor, yet not so great. As a wrestler actor, pretty good. He's okay. He's doable.
Yeah.
I know we are kind of closing out, but I'm glad we brought this up now during the first episode. We will have to discuss this again after we've watched more cinema, TV, or other media starring one Rowdy Roddy Piper and see if our opinions have changed in any way. But I think that about covers the 88 classic, if you will, Hell Comes to Frogtown.
But we still got to give you your score.
It's true. The end of the conversation, but now just begins the judgment, if you will.
The justification.
Wow.
All right. So I've got our scoreboard live for our first of our Roddy Piper theme. Hell Comes to Frogtown. I did not change the names on it. I knew I forgot something. So right? Oh no, wait. I did change the names on it, didn't I?
No, everything looks good.
Yeah, because Rob's not there. I did. Wait a minute.
I'm on the top.
I don't remember what I did, or maybe someone else. Mike did it. That's why I was like, wait a minute, I didn't change the names. Crap, wait, they are changed. So that's sneaky Mike. Thank you. All right. Well, I guess I'm in the top slot. So I'm gonna give this one some scores. I'm gonna give it some scores. So like honestly, hold on, I gotta get to my right one. Honestly, the rarity, I had never even heard of this crap before we found it. So I had to give it a 5 because it's pretty darn rare. That being said, though, am I going to talk myself out of a point? I don't think so. That's okay. That being said, it hit the meme market. There's so many like GIFs and stuff from this that I was kind of shocked. So like, does that bring it down to a 4? I'll keep it at a 5. That's fine. I'll give it a higher score. But there were a lot out.
That just increases the enjoyment factor.
It keeps on giving.
So either way, you add one here, you take one off there, it all equals out.
If you're not careful here, Eric, he's gonna win again.
I know. I know.
We're gonna be watching the sequel.
Don't worry. I'm gonna get there. The theme. So like the theme. Roddy Piper is in this, and that's the theme. So like, I guess that's a 5 too, right? Like, how do you? Is it a yes or no? Don't worry. And then for enjoyment, this is where I'm going to go back to the phrase that I said earlier, where this movie has no business being as good as it is, but it's also a bad movie. So I'm conflicted there. So I had to max give it a 3 because I came in expecting to think it was like terrible, and parts of it were. But it did surprise me. So I have this like conflicted, like, because like, how can I put, like, I did not enjoy it as much as I enjoyed something like The Hogfather, which I did give a perfect score to. And so I can't,
rightfully so.
I can't do that. Like, you know what I mean? So it's like, because I have this, it's like right down the middle. I put it right in the middle because I kind of had middle of the road feelings about it. So altogether, that is a pretty high score, but it did surprise me. So that gives it a 13 from me.
All right. So for rarity, I'm going to give it a 4. I wasn't familiar with it, but again, to Eric's point, the internet world at large is aware of it. And it's got Roddy Piper in it. So theme, this whole thing is rigged. You have to give it a 5.
Is this like a yes or no? Because
I think it's kind of a yes or no.
If Roddy Piper's in it, but he's not the star, then I guess you'd be like, well, that's kind of like a 3 or a 4. But then if he's like, I guess you could totally go rogue and be like, forget Roddy Piper, I'm just picking this movie. And then you do bad on the theme.
I mean, the theme is
in it.
The theme is Rowdy Piper, and I think he's part of that group of machoism. So this is a perfect role for him. So 5. Enjoyment. I watched the trailer, and after watching the trailer, I was like, oh hell no! Like I can't possibly watch this. Like, I was expecting this to just be like a pornographic sci-fi movie or something based on the trailer.
It went to the
that's
edge
Eric's
of the cliff
version
of
Hell Comes to Frogtown, or Frogtown Comes to Hell would be that one. That's the X-rated version.
I said they shouldn't have brought him out in the field. Yeah, no, they stand on the cliff of that and look down, but they never go there.
Yeah, so I was surprised it wasn't as bad as I was expecting. So I'm going to give it a 3. So 12.
It's solid number.
Right. So for mine, rarity, I have to give it a 4, because I had seen it when Svengoolie showed it way back when, and I knew of it, especially just knowing. Again, I'll say my pick for next month. It took me back to having watched this, so I was happy to watch it though. Theme, of course, a 5, because, I mean, there's not a whole lot of the movie that he's not in.
He is the star. He is
Yeah.
the star, exactly.
Enjoyment, I'm going to give it a 4. It's a great example of how a B movie should be. It hits the check boxes that I said. Over the top situation with over the top character, with over the top reactions, and it didn't take itself too seriously, like a lot of movies with weird plots do. So I mean, it's a great pick, and it will tie in well with next month's pick, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
You keep teasing next month's pick. Like
You're like the tease. That's all you are.
The first thing
I'm building it up. I want you guys ready to give me those perfect scores.
The first thing
building up that Roddy Piper.
Yeah, for sure. No, so 38 points. 38 points. Not bad. Not too shabby, right? Did I do that right? Yeah. I did that right. All right, let's go on to our next slide where we have our
scoreboard.
Right. All right. So Rob's got a 38, a big 38 up on the board, and Andrew, you've been teasing us this whole time. So what is that all about?
All right.
And
so next month we are going to be sticking with 1988, and we're going to be watching They Live. So Hell Comes to Frogtown came out in, I think it was January of 88, and They Live came out in November. So we're getting a little bit further into his, professional acting career, but not a whole lot farther.
So you're going chronologically here?
Well, it ended up that way.
Do we all have to go chronologically? No.
We're all going to be, you're going to be in January of 89. Yeah.
If we do, I'm going to laugh hysterically if it just ends up working out that way.
So They Live is a sci-fi horror action movie written and directed by John Carpenter and starring Rowdy, of course, but also Keith David and Meg Foster. And Keith David, you'll recognize from a lot of things, especially if you like John Carpenter, you'll recognize him from The Thing. But it's a great film that I'm excited to share because it really ties in well with Hell Comes to Frogtown. You'll probably tell me that it felt like a sequel, but
I'm after it.
Different plot, but in spirit a sequel anyway. So you can go ahead and watch it for free on YouTube, or you can also rent it from Amazon or Google Movies or a lot of the other streaming services. And of course, go to your local library if you want a physical copy. I know Eric wants me to plug that one there.
Always.
And otherwise, watch They Live and join us here next time on the Rowdy Roddy Rare Cuts Media Society.
We only have 3 more months, folks.
Yeah, it's the Rowdy Roddy Piper
the last 3 months
Media Society. For now it is. Unless Rob wins again, and then he makes that the theme again.
Just repeats. It's a cycle.
Rowdy Roddy Piper movies that we didn't pick before.
Ric Flair cameos.
Yeah, films with Ric Flair. Woo!
Ric Flair cameos on Baywatch.
No,
that's a thing with the Macho Man and Hulk Hogan.
Visit us online at rarecutsmediasociety.com. There you can find old episodes, subscribe, or connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for listening.